Do you have any other tips you could share about the best way to work with a cover designer so it's the best experience for both of you?
Yeah. So I think that the best thing to do with cover designers is to recognize that they are extremely busy people and they, at the end of the day, just want to make you happy because if you win, they win, to your earlier point. And so the best thing you can do, in my opinion, when I'm working with a cover designer, the number one thing I'm focusing on giving them is clarity. Because what a lot of people do is the cover designer will say, "What do you want on your cover?" And then the author will bomb them with pages and pages of synopses and descriptions of characters and all that stuff. And if you're doing that, you're probably doing it the wrong way. So what I would do is I would provide clarity to the cover designer. So what I like to do is the easiest thing to do, what I like to do is I'll put together a Pinterest board. I'll look at all of the best-selling books in my genre and subgenre. I'll throw all of those on a Pinterest board, and then I'll send that to the designer and say, "Hey, I want something that looks like this. Whatever you design, I'd love to be able to just throw it on this Pinterest board, and it would look like it belongs." And that'll help keep your designer on track. A lot of designers will give you questionnaires and they'll say, "What do you want in your background? What do you want in the foreground? Are there any colors that you would like? Give me a brief description of your character." And I would fill that out, but I would use very clear and short sentences. When they say, "Give me a synopsis of your book," don't give them the whole synopsis. They don't need it. They don't need it, nor do they care. I would just focus on giving them the most information that they can so that they can fill out or that they can put that onto the cover. And also, when you're working with the designer, let's say the designer sends you a draft. 9 times out of 10, like I said, I've done this for a while, about 8 years. Every cover that I've gotten first draft, I've instantly like, "Oh, this sucks. I don't like it." That is a completely normal feeling. And what I would do is just take 5, 10 minutes, walk around the block, think about why you don't like it, think about what you do like, what you don't like, and remember those 5 elements of a cover. And then what I would do is I would say, "Designer, here's what I liked. And then here's what I'd like to work on." And then what I would do is I would break my feedback out by the different elements of your cover. So I would say, author name looks great. Title, I'm not sure if this works. Maybe is there something you could do in this area? Foreground, the model just doesn't seem like the right model to me. And if you give feedback based on each different element, that gives you really clear advice to your designer about how they can help you better.
Do you feel as if designers, let me ask it in a different way. I'm sure that different designers are more or less clued into what's a successful cover. I was talking earlier about the woman in the yellow jacket. Like, obviously, that's showing up on a lot of covers because it must have been very successful for some traditionally published suspense or thriller book. And I never know whether I can rely on the cover designer to be on top of all that stuff. Like, I'm sure a lot of them are, but sometimes they'll ask, "Give some examples of covers that you really like." And I always do that, but I think, am I leading them down the wrong path? Because a cover that I really like is not necessarily like, I love the Patricia Highsmith covers. I'm sure Patricia Highsmith has had lots of covers over the course of how long her books have been out, but the covers, if you go to Amazon or Barnes& and Noble now, on the covers, but I don't think that's a currently wildly popular design. So how do you make sure you're getting something that's not only very lovely, but also sellable?
Yeah, to me, it comes down to picking the right person at the end of the day. To me, that's 80% of the battle, is finding somebody that has designed covers in your subgenre that have sold or that do well. Because if you can do that, then you have a pretty good idea that the designer has somewhat of an idea of what should be on the cover. Also, giving that clarity to them makes sense because if you give your designer too much, you're going to get a confused design. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I like to believe that the onus is on the author and not the designer. So you got to pick the right person, give them the right instructions, and then let them do what they do best. Because like I said, if you pick the right person, everything falls into place from there. If you pick, like I write in urban fantasy, if I pick a space genre's cover designer, then I know I'm going to have problems because they're not going to have a clue on what the background should look like. Or maybe they do, but they're going to give an outdated looking cover. So that's my biggest advice. That's worked pretty well for me in the past.
There's one final question I want to ask you on this because this is so interesting. I found a number of times that I'll get the draft back from the designer. And fortunately, I don't usually hate it. Fortunately, I usually like it. But there are always like a couple of little things like, oh, do you think the title should be a little higher? And most of the time I'm sincerely asking, do you think the title should be higher or is it where it is for a reason? And it seems that normally the response is just to do whatever I've suggested might be an alternative. Is there a way you frame that up so it's clearer to them that you're intending it to be a back and forth and you're okay with them saying, no, it's okay where it is?
I like to do the A and B shuffle. So what I'll ask them is, hey, I won't even say anything. I'll just say, hey, can you move the title a little bit higher and then give me an option where I can see it higher and then I can see it where it is currently.
Mhm.
Can you change the model so that she's wearing a red jacket versus a yellow jacket? And I'll do all of that. And then when I get them back, I'll look at them side by side. And that way the designer doesn't feel like, oh, I just need to do that and not think about it. Because sometimes if you, like I said, it comes back to picking the right person. If you pick the right person, they'll give you some feedback. They'll say, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And when they give you the design back, they'll say, I personally think B looks a little bit better, but you also have to remember about the background and there'll be some other things that they can give you. As opposed to someone who just does what you tell them to do, they can give you some really good feedback and it becomes more of a collaborative endeavor. So
Yeah.
that's why I like the AB because that sometimes gets some conversation going between me and the designer.